if you're ready to stand on the line, if you're ready to fight back and serve it to the criminals trying to enslave you and steal your wealth through monetary creation and exorbitant taxation, you're in the right place. Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including fish antibiotics, long-term storage food, water filters, bug-out bags, and first aid kits. Use coupon code PrepperRecon for 5% off your entire order at CampingSurvival.com.
Hello, Kim Jong speaking.
Kim, is Vlad Putin. I have calling for RSVP about birthday party for you. I don't know what to bring it. I having some Soviet-era warhead. Little rusty, but could be cleaned.
No, I have already. I want Mali-compatible individual first aid kit from the PrepperRecon.com. It has everything for traumatic injury. Tourniquet, IBD, quick clot, suture kit, EMT shears, and chest seal. And so easy for bite. Go to PrepperRecon.com and click Store tab at the top of the home page. $89 includes shipping.
Okay, I buy for you. They have many tactical color. Do you preferring coyote, OD green, ACU, or black?
How about you surprise me?
Okay, I make surprise. But don't surprising me with those kimchi rolls again. Last time I eat, I had to leave in G20 early. And other thing, if Rodman wears miniskirt to party, I leaving.
Today's guest is Derek Gilbert. Derek is the host of View from the Bunker and author of a fantastic novel called The God Conspiracy. Derek, welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here, Mark. Thank you.
Absolutely. And of course, you had me on your show recently, and it was just a great time. We had just a great discussion, and everybody can go over to View from the Bunker and check that out whenever you get a little time. Now, Derek, can you start by telling us about your podcast, View from the Bunker?
It was an outgrowth of the podcast that my wife and I have been producing for 10 years, PID Radio. The PID stands for Peering into Darkness. And that began in 2005, shortly after the code was developed to syndicate podcasts, the RSS feeds. The podcast was begun as a low-budget way to try to market our novels, like The God Conspiracy, Sharon's novels like The Armageddon Strain, Winds of Evil, Signs and Wonders. We were writing in the same fictional world, but writing separately from one another. We share some characters and some plot ideas back and forth. And the publisher said, well, you're going to need to market your books. We don't have a lot of money for marketing, so you're going to need to do television. It's like, well, okay, 2005, television, really? But I had heard about this thing called podcasting, and being a radio broadcaster since 1980, I thought, okay, with a power book and a couple of headset mics, we could probably record something and turn this into a low-budget way to market ourselves. So we did a first show where we told people why they should buy our books. And then when it came to doing the next program, we thought, okay, now what? Well, let's talk about why we write. And that began some investigation, some interviews with people who have really dug deep into crypto politics, the unexplained, the paranormal, and so forth. And that it actually turned out that rather than marketing the books were really the door opening for us to begin PID Radio, which again we've been doing for 10 years. Now it helped that I had some broadcast experience, worked on the air in Peoria, Illinois, Rockford, Illinois, Philadelphia, St. Louis, Little Rock, and had an idea of what we wanted it to sound like. It was just getting the equipment to do what we needed it to do. But after about a few years of doing this and doing a number of interviews, Sharon, she's not as much into interviewing as I am. She and I basically on PID Radio, the two of us just talk and kind of analyze what's going on in the world from our perspective. View from the Bunker is an interview program, and that is something I really enjoy because I get to talk to people who have important things to say, people who I think are interesting. So we just kind of spun off A View from the Bunker from that in 2009. We've gotten, over 275 interviews now online at A View from the Bunker. And, it's everything from politicians, transhumanists, preachers, Bible scholars, conspiracy researchers. It's a gamut. And every now and then somebody who writes fiction or who is in the entertainment industry occasionally. That's not a major part of the program, but it's what I wanted to do when I was a kid. And my normal friends were listening to Top 40 radio. I was the 10-year-old kid who'd go to bed at night with the AM radio listening to late-night talk show hosts. So that's what was my dream. An odd thing, but thanks to the internet and, decent electronics available for consumers now, we can produce a program like that and come out with decent quality in a spare bedroom.
Yeah, technology is certainly making all that stuff much more accessible for just everybody to sort of have their own show if they want, and especially for people that have always dreamed of doing something like that, it's very, very accessible now. Now, can you give us a brief synopsis about the God Conspiracy?
It was a book that was prompted by research that we were doing back in 2004 and 2005 when it became obvious to us that the world, to me anyway, Sharon had kind of figured this out long before I did. She's a lot smarter than I am. That the world was not quite the way it was portrayed to us through mainstream media, and not even Fox News. So started doing some digging into questions that I had about what our government was doing, especially in the wake of the attacks on September 11th of 2001, which led to digging into what FEMA was really all about, what it was trying to do, what the Patriot Act really gave the government the authority to do, the organizations, secret societies around the world, like the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, although I've learned quite a bit more about the Trilateral Commission since then, thanks to a researcher named Patrick Wood, who's really does some groundbreaking work in that regard. Wanted to put that in there basically as a message to other Christians. I am a Bible-believing Christian, but I think Christians have been taken for a ride because we, in general now, have not paid enough attention to what's really going on out there. And I think that's true of most people, kind of look at the world in kind of black and white terms and believe what they hear from CNN or Fox News. But Christians have sort of been taken for granted by the Republican Party. Just as progressives in this current administration have been taken for granted, true progressives have been taken for granted by the Obama administration. We know you're in our pocket, so we're going to do whatever we want, whether you like it or not, because we know you're not going to vote anywhere else. That's kind of what happened, has been happening with conservative Christians since before the Reagan administration, really. So this was intended as a kind of wake-up call to conservative Christians that just because the White House may be occupied by a Republican doesn't mean that the government is then looking out for your best interests. And that may be why our publisher actually dropped us, because when they got to the editing phase of that book, suddenly they weren't as interested in marketing our books at all anymore.
And that was
because it was released during the George W. Bush administration.
Yeah. Now, Bush, who was supposedly staunchly pro-life, at least in all of his, in all of the campaign rhetoric we heard from him, that was a big thing to him, and of course he got a lot of votes because of that. But now, when he got into office, there was a 2-year period that he had complete control of, obviously, the Oval Office and Republican control in the Senate and the House. And there was absolutely no legislation put through during that 2-year period that had any effect on abortion whatsoever. Is that what you're talking about when you say Christians were taken for a ride?
Well, in part, also that the rights of Christians not necessarily protected. It's interesting that now during the Obama administration, in 2014, finally the mainstream media woke up and noticed that the Christian communities of Syria and Iraq were being absolutely obliterated by radical Islamists. But that was going on after we deposed Saddam Hussein in 2004. We saw the population, the Christian population of Iraq, drop from over 2 million to a couple 100,000 before Obama took office. And it's only now that the elites are agitating, trying to motivate the American public to support a re-invasion of the area, which is what the president is requesting now with his authorization for the use of military force. Trying to get us motivated to send our sons and daughters back to the Middle East. That they noticed that the Christian communities there, some of the oldest Christian communities on the planet, have been virtually destroyed. So, the story begins that there's an outbreak of a disease, very much like Ebola, and that because of there's an event very similar to what a researcher and deliverance minister named Russ Dizdar has been talking about for a while. Something he's been hearing about from people that he's been working with for years, called the Black Awakening, a day in which some trigger event will spark an outbreak, a massive outbreak of terror all around the country, and then the resulting clampdown on civil rights. That was sort of the premise of the novel, and then on that framework hanging various references to, and you could call them conspiracy theories, except that a lot of these things have been documented through Freedom of Information Act requests or congressional testimony, that just to let Christians know that, government isn't really where you're supposed to be, trusting for your future. Your government is good when it's well run, and it's there to help us live peaceful lives. But let's not just assume that because there's somebody with an R after his name in the office that things will go the way we think they should go. So yes, the abortion topic is one. Another is. Well, I think a more recent example, and of course the book was written in 2006, so this is well before the Affordable Care Act was passed, but the Supreme Court justice that was nominated by George W. Bush, John Roberts, who was supposedly a conservative, was the guy who cast the swing vote in the Supreme Court ruling that said, well, yeah, Congress can tell American citizens that they have to buy this product, health care insurance. So, again, just another reminder, and that's the kind of message I wanted to convey in the God Conspiracy, that we shouldn't trust in government to achieve the ends that we hope to achieve. If we want to influence the world and make it a kinder, gentler place, we need to do it from the pulpit and not at the ballot box.
And one of the conspiracies you write about in the God Conspiracy is the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens, and they're being detained in your book without being charged of any criminal act. Now, most of my audience is pretty well aware of the 2012 NDAA indefinite detention clause, because I kind of harp on that one quite a bit.
Sure.
And it makes provisions for such actions by the state. But you wrote that 6 years prior to that legislation. Was that prophetic, or did you just see that as a natural progression of the way we were headed?
Well, I wouldn't say prophetic, because it was information that was available to people who were paying attention. That power really came with the Patriot Act, in 2001. So it wasn't that I was gifted with any special insight or analytic ability. I just try to read as much as I can and absorb as much as I can, and that was out there before I wrote the book. There was somebody else who saw a presentation I gave in Chicago a couple of years ago about NSA spying, and noted that I had been talking about the NSA's ability to listen in on our phone conversations, our email, intercept our Skype calls, and so forth. About 6 months before the Edward Snowden revelations came out. So this would have been spring of 2013, and called me prophetic. I was like, well, no, not really. And I went back and I showed a screen capture of an archived program that Sharon and I did on PID Radio in 2006. Whistleblowers back in 2006 were talking about the NSA having tapped into AT&T's trunk line in San Francisco, which gave them access to so much information that one analyst called it a country tap, not a wiretap, a country tap. So the information was out there in 2006. It's just most of America didn't notice it until it made the headlines in 2013. You just have to keep your eyes open and pay attention.
And then they didn't get very upset about it, really.
No,
Americans. It really just went right back to sleep.
Became a joke. Oh, better not say that. The NSA is probably listening. Well, yeah.
It's time for a quick break, and we'll be right back. The dollar's lost over 90% of its purchasing power since 1971. Silver, on the other hand, has proved to be a very stable form of wealth preservation over the years. And where do you buy silver? Silver.com, of course. Silver.com offers fantastic prices on silver and gold. Check out Silver.com today. Now, you're entering into a new chapter in your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, we've been blessed with the opportunity to join a new media organization based in the Missouri Ozarks, which is a beautiful place to live. So it's like the best of both worlds. We get to move to a less expensive state. Even though I was born and raised in Illinois, Chicago, it just costs too much to live here. So we're moving to Missouri at the end of this month, end of February, and joining Skywatch TV. And this is a new media venture that is developed by Tom Horn, who's the CEO of Defender Publishing, which over the last 6-7 years has become the largest publisher of Bible prophecy books in the country, according to Amazon. And it will feature a weekly 30-minute interview program, which will be syndicated through cable television, and right now they're pitching it to certain networks. It'll probably be on DirecTV within the next month or two. All the programs will be available through YouTube as well, so people who don't have the right satellite hookup or don't subscribe to cable can still, if they get internet access, can still watch all the programs. And that'll be interviews with authors and speakers and who look at Bible prophecy, but also look at what we call crypto politics. Usually through a Christian lens, but we want to kind of expand that out a little bit. For example, one of the first interviews that will appear is an interview with a co-author of a book called Redeemed Unredeemable, which looked at a number of cases of notorious killers from the 20th century, like Ted Bundy and the Son of Sam killer David Berkowitz, Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee cannibal, who professed to repent and accept Jesus as Savior while they were in prison. That raises a whole lot of questions. How do you know they're sincere? But more importantly, what does it mean if they're sincere? So, examining questions like that about what does it really mean when you say you're a Christian. There are a lot of people out there who say they're Christians. I talked with a prominent transhumanist the other night who made the statement that 92% of congressmen in Washington, D.C. are Christian. And, I had to question that because they may say they're Christian, but are they really, or are they just saying so for political purposes? Because even in America today, just saying that you're an atheist in a lot of parts of the country would be enough to disqualify you for office. Not officially, but in the minds of a lot of voters. So, but there's a big difference between saying you are something and actually being something. I could put on a baseball cap, but that doesn't make me the third baseman for the Chicago Cubs. So we're going to try to look at what does it mean when you say this, just because you call yourself something. How do you respond to certain things, political situations? Should Christians support continuing warfare against groups in the Middle East? Again, if you've got a worldview that's pretty much shaped by Fox News, I think a lot of people would say, yes, we should go there. We should engage in a war of destruction against the Islamic State, or we should depose Bashar al-Assad of Syria, or whatever. But when we start looking at what the result of American foreign policy in the Middle East over the last 15 years, and our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan and Libya and Sudan and Somalia and Congo. Oh, yes, we special forces in Congo. Most Americans aren't even aware that we've got soldiers in active duty in the Congo. And other places around the world. Yemen, drone strikes. How many people have died, actually, in those wars? many of whom were, violent, vicious killers who would seek to do us harm. But there's been a fair amount of collateral damage as well. So, again, we just want to ask difficult questions and try to come to some kind of an answer. And frankly, some of these questions may not have any answers. But we'll look at those things, and we'll also look at the paranormal and the supernatural as well. If you profess to believe in a God who created the universe, your worldview should be big enough to answer or at least address questions about things like ghosts and UFOs.
And then, of course, there's going to be a strong focus on prophecy with Skywatch. Is that correct?
Yeah, because just like topics like ghosts and UFOs, there's a real interest in it. Otherwise, you wouldn't see all of these ghost hunter shows on channels where it doesn't seem to make any sense, like the Travel Channel. There are people out there who want to know: is there more out there than just this, what we see on planet Earth? And if so, what does it mean for us? What are ghosts? And then there's a real interest, of course, in wanting to know where we're going. I mean, that's one of the big questions. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Which is why there's such an interest in mediums and the prophecies, I'll use that word in air quotes, of Nostradamus and so forth. The Bible, the majority of the Bible, a big chunk of the Bible is devoted to prophecy. Not all of it end times prophecy. Some of it's been fulfilled already, which argues for the authenticity of the Bible, but and there is an awful lot of it that deals with the end times. And it's not necessarily clear, and I think deliberately so. I think God didn't want to reveal it to us so that we would understand it completely. If you accept the biblical worldview, then you understand that, as the Apostle Paul wrote, our wrestling match is not against human opponents, but against intelligent evil that seeks to do us harm. And if we could understand the prophecies of the end times perfectly, then the enemy could understand them even better and be able to deceive us and fabricate some very creative and convincing lies. So we look at what goes on in the Middle East and the struggle over Israel. In my view, when you take religion out of the equation, it makes no sense at all. I mean, is it really that strategically important? It was back in the day when most of the world's kingdoms were centered in the Middle East, and the only way to get to Egypt or from Egypt to the rest of the Middle East was to go through Palestine, through Israel. So yes, it was strategically important then, but today, not so much. I mean, but why are we still fixated on what goes on in Israel, and specifically who controls Jerusalem? There's got to be more to it than just geopolitics. There's got to be maybe use the term theopolitics, dealing with theology. Why are Muslims, Jews, Christians, and various denominations of Christendom arguing with one another, struggling with one another over who gets to control Jerusalem? So prophecy, yeah, that will be an important component of what we're going to do on Skywatch TV.
And of course, it'd have to be being linked to Tom Horn, and of course, Tom Horn's very very involved with Chuck Missler, mm-hmm. who came out of the Calvary Chapel movement, and Chuck Smith is sort of accredited to starting that movement as far as the human influence, at least. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that the late Pastor Chuck Smith would teach is that a lot of prophecy in the Bible would have a near and a far fulfillment. God sent lots of prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah to warn Israel about forsaking him. Do you think those books could also be applied to the present state of America?
I think we can draw lessons from the warnings that were given to Israel. I know that there are some very popular prophecy books in recent years that have drawn from prophecies in the book of Isaiah in particular, and I'm talking about Rabbi Jonathan Cahn and I'm forgetting the name of the book off the top of my head, but
well, there's the Harbinger, and then and then that one was really focused about how 9/11 could be looked at as sort of a judgment or warning, really more of a warning from God than a judgment.
Right, the Harbinger
and then his newer series is the mystery of the Shmita.
Right. And I think there are some lessons there that can be drawn from those warnings. I think we run the risk of stretching things too far if we say that these specifically apply to America today. But sure, I think we can draw some lessons from those books. And I agree with the idea of a short-term and a near and far prophetic fulfillment, or what another scholar, Dr. Michael Heiser, calls already but not yet. For example, the abomination that causes desolation that the prophet Daniel talked about, which was fulfilled already in the form of Antiochus Epiphanes, who ended the sacrifice in the temple in Jerusalem when his kingdom, which was a successor state to Alexander the Great's, conquered the Holy Land, conquered the Jews, and he sacrificed a pig, and if I remember correctly, he set up an altar to Zeus in the temple. So, abomination that causes desolation. But clearly, when Jesus talks about it, it is in the prophetic sense. So there will be another fulfillment of this at some point, because Jesus, of course, lived after Antiochus. So, yeah, I agree with that. But again, I think that because certain things in prophecy are not necessarily clear, and I think there are certain assumptions that have to be made in order to undergird various interpretations of the timeline of the end times, that we need to be careful to hold too tightly to any particular theory in the face of contradictory evidence. One of the quickest ways to get Christians arguing amongst one another is to kind of throw out the question. So, pre-tribulation rapture, post-tribulation rapture, mid-tribulation rapture. What do you think? For some reason, that question seems to really get people going. Well, you pre-tribbers, you're just wishful thinkers. You just think you're going to get out of here before things get bad. And look, the assumptions that undergird the various timelines require some interpretation. Again, it's not clearly spelled out. And so you have to, examine the evidence and reach a conclusion, but with the understanding that, the assumption that I've made that supports my interpretation of end times prophecy might not be the correct one. It's the one I think is correct, but that's not the same thing as saying that it is correct. And so I think Christians who are arguing back and forth over the specific timeline of the rapture should turn around and point the guns outward, because there are more important enemies to face.
But now, from a preparedness perspective, would you say that scriptures like Deuteronomy 28, where it clearly lays out what the blessings should be expected if you obey God, and the curses that you should expect if you forsake God, do you think that those can be sort of generally applied to any nation that was formed under the blessings of God?
Yeah, but I think that comes down to how you define commandments and statutes. But I would say in general, yes. With this caveat, we know that even though among those who are faithful, that sometimes bad things happen to good people. We're living in a world that is temporarily under the control of the enemy, the prince of this world, or the god of this world, as Jesus called him. And sometimes that enemy is allowed to have some impact, on our lives. In other words, there's not a quid pro quo. If I follow God's commandments, he is obligated to, bless me or reward me. Sometimes, again, bad things will happen to good people. I think generally speaking, though, that you're in better standing, and I think if you follow his will and his commandments, where again, and if I sound like I'm being a little wishy-washy, it's not deliberately so. I think, yes, we're certainly better off and in his favor, more likely to be in his favor if we follow his commandments and statutes. But the Old Testament commandments and statutes addressed to Israel or the children of Israel, many of those, and there will be letters, I'm sure, are no longer applicable to us today, because we're told in the New Testament that all of the law and all of the prophets hangs on two commandments: love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And elsewhere in the New Testament, we are told that if you love your neighbor as you love yourself, you have fulfilled all of the law, all of the Mosaic law that was handed down to the Hebrews by Moses. But in general, yes, I think we are more likely to be blessed if we are walking in his ways and trying to fulfill the law and the prophets by loving him and by loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. And I think one aspect of loving your neighbor is being prepared for when stuff hits the fan, as it will. Even as a guy who leans toward the pre-tribulation rapture, I think that it still would be wise to prepare, because just because pre-tribulation doesn't mean we won't go through hard times. If we are brought out of here before the great tribulation, which is when God unleashes his wrath on a disobedient world, Jesus very specifically told his followers that they would endure tribulation. So I don't think we have any expectation of an easy ride and then a get out of tribulation free card before God judges the world. We may, as Christians, and I think we can see this trend already in the United States, we will probably endure some persecution and some rough times, and it may not be specifically directed at us, some of these hard times. I mean, economically, we're living in an unsustainable. This country's budget is unsustainable. There may come an economic collapse that catches all of us in that net, and we just need to be prepared. And I think one of the reasons for preparing is so that we can share with neighbors who are in need.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jonathan Cahn's Shmita. Now, have you heard those talks or read that book?
I've not read the book. I did interview him about the book, but to say that I'm really familiar with it would be not entirely true.
But you're familiar with the two past Shmitas, which I did go on and look up on a independent Jewish calendar, and indeed 9/11 fell on one about 14 years ago, and then about 7 years ago, the biggest stock market drop of 777 points was also on a Shmita, and now we've got another one coming up. And what it is it's this sort of this Jewish idea, or part of the Jewish calendar of they would have a sort of a clearing away of debts and a clearing away, a reset on the accounting, so to speak. So if we haven't really gotten back to those two primary commands of loving God and loving our neighbor as ourselves, are you a little bit concerned about the Shmita that's coming around this September?
Not any more than I have been for the last few years. Just kind of looking at the way we're piling up debt, the way the economy is now saddled with the burden of Obamacare. The timing of it, if it falls in September, I wouldn't be surprised, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happened at any point in 2015, just because of the unsustainability of the debt load that we carry and the new burden of additional taxes and costs imposed on us by Obamacare. Just some early warning signs that I'm already seeing that the economy is kind of wobbling a little bit. For the past 7 years, for the past 7 years, I've been in the metals distribution industry, and already over the last 3 months, we've seen a decrease in activity at the manufacturing level.
And that's steel.
That is steel. There are certain sectors that are still doing well. For example, trailer manufacturers are very busy because they're still replacing trailers that just about rusted to pieces in 2009 and 2010. Trailers that should have been replaced back then, but weren't because the economy was so soft. So the trailer guys are really busy, and for them this is great because the cost of their raw materials is declining. But with the energy sector hurting, and a lot of the job growth in the United States over the last 5 years coming from the energy sector as the shale gas and shale oil industry has grown. That is stagnated because of the low price of oil. which is also affecting the steel industry because if you're not drilling, you don't need new rigs or platforms or pump jacks and things like that. Normally, the first couple of months of a new year, distributors will be reloading inventory as you get toward the spring and summer construction season, as things warm up in the oil patch where you can get out to the pumps and start doing repairs or new drilling or whatever. Things get busier, we tend to load up an inventory, and that hasn't happened this year. Costs at the mill level have been declining because there is a surplus of material being held by distributors. So a lot of the prognosticators think the economy will pick up in that regard by summer, maybe late summer, but I don't know. There may be some underlying factors, because I do not pretend to be an economist of it. I'm just reporting anecdotal evidence of what I can see with my own eyes. But there may be some factors that are hamstringing the economy that we don't see that may, who knows, may culminate in a decline in September, just as Rabbi Kahn suggests. So again, preparedness, I think, is a good practical thing for a lot of reasons. You want to make sure your family is ready. But again, it's an opportunity to reach out to people in need, people who may not be aware of what's going on, people who may have certain preconceived ideas about what Christians are like. And this would be an opportunity to perhaps open a door that would otherwise be closed.
Now, one of the words you used about what you're seeing in the economy is wobble. And I think that's a really, really good definition because we've seen some wobbling. We've seen it's nothing now to see oil move 5% in either direction in a day in the past couple of weeks. We've seen 5% swings in silver, which is usually a really fairly stable market. And we've seen it's nothing to see a 5% up day or down day. Currencies, we really typically don't see big moves in currencies. Currencies are things that you think of as you think, how boring would it be to be a currency trader, because they'll move 1% over the course of 6 months or something. And in the past few months, we've seen the Swiss franc jump 30% in one day, and we've seen the ruble drop 30% in one day. Is that kind of what you're talking about when you say wobble?
Well, yeah, things that we here in Middle America that most people in Middle America don't see with our eyes. That stuff's happening on the other side of the planet, but those ripples from the pond over there will reach us over here. I mean, the Swiss franc jumped 30%, and I read that there was some sort of money, I think it was a money market fund, rather large fund that was wiped out in a single day because the guy responsible for managing the fund bet the wrong way on that move. And a rather large fund, millions and millions of dollars under his control, was essentially wiped out in a single day. So the situation with Greece and the EU is something that will probably have an impact over here. And I'm not smart enough or educated enough to know what exactly that's going to be. I know that we're seeing a lot more import steel in the United States showing up in our markets here. The Chinese were soaking up a lot of that steel production up till about 2008, as they were getting ready for the Olympics there. And after then, their demand for steel has declined somewhat. I mean, there was a kind of a joke that was going around back then that you could get more money for a used car by driving it into a crusher than trying to sell it, because the Chinese were so desperate for scrap steel to meet their demand for new production to get ready for the Beijing Olympics. But that has declined somewhat. The Chinese economy isn't as robust as it was back then. Again, as you mentioned, the ruble has declined in part because of the low price of oil. Russia and Vladimir Putin was very shrewd in using their natural energy resources as a geopolitical tool in dealing with the West. That has weakened somewhat as the Saudis have kind of taken that weapon out of his hands. The Saudis, because of the production of oil that they've been putting into the world market since last fall, have really put the screws to Iran and to Russia, and by extension then Syria, because both of those states are supporting the government of Assad in Syria. The Saudis are losing money as well, based on an article I read that showed what the various countries of the world needed the price of oil to be in order to balance their budgets. And, the Saudis are going into the red, but they've got cash reserves where they can absorb this for a while. The Iranians and the Russians cannot. And so, again, that's having an impact. It's great when we can go out and fill our gas tanks, at $1.50 cheaper than we were able to a few months ago. But there are other economic impacts that aren't quite so good.
And I'm really, really looking forward to Skywatch going live on YouTube, because I'm a big YouTube fan. We don't have cable, and we've got instead the Roku box. And so I send all my videos from YouTube to the Roku box, and I can watch a lot of educational stuff there. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. Can you just tell us one more time when you expect Skywatch to go live?
Well, we've got some programs that are in the can right now, and we've sort of been parsing them out slowly in order to bide time until we actually get on site. We will be in Missouri by March 1, and hopefully within a couple of weeks we will be up and running. We need to start scheduling guests to come in for interviews, but we've got some guests who have already been interviewed, and those programs are in the can, kind of waiting for us to put out there. But there are some interviews that are already live at our YouTube channel, and the website is skywatchtv.com. They'll be posted there as well. I would say that we should be hitting a stride by the beginning of April.
And then you're still going to be doing a View from the Bunker as well, and can you tell the folks where they can find that?
Yeah, View from the Bunker is online at vftb.net. That's what my English minor wife calls an acronym. VFTB, View from the Bunker, vftb.net.
And PID Radio?
That's PIDradio.com.
Very good. And we'll have a link to purchase your book through Amazon in the show notes today. But you also have a copy of the audio edition. You can get that from View from the Bunker. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a link at the top that links to the novels, and there's a link there to the audio version, which I released as a almost like a podcast through a website called podiobooks.com, where every week while it was being produced, I would release a new section, a couple of chapters a week. So you can go there and you can subscribe to it, download them as you listen to them, and basically get it for free that way. It's a donate or basically on a donation basis. So you can get that, and also my other novel, which is completely out of the genre. It's more of a science fiction fantasy mashup called Iron Dragons. Both of those are available at podiobooks.com.
Well, it's a fantastic book, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm almost through with it myself and just loving it. And everybody that likes my books will definitely enjoy that. So I definitely encourage everybody to check that out. Derek, thanks so much for taking time. I know you're really busy getting ready to move, and I appreciate you making time to come on the show today.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just got a lot busier. Just before we came on, the mailman showed up, and he's holding my mailbox in his arms, saying, "Sorry, my truck hit your box," and knocked it off the post.
Oh,
so,
no.
That's added to the list. But Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Are we living in a time of which there is more prophetic writings than of any period in history? Watch through the eyes of Noah Parker and his family as a global empire takes shape. Ancient writings are fulfilled, and the last days fall upon the once great United States of America. The Days of Noah, Book 1, Conspiracy by Mark Goodwin, is a fast-paced fiction thriller which looks at how modern conspiracies could play into biblical prophecy concerning end times. Buy The Days of Noah in paperback, Kindle, or audio edition at Amazon.com today.